let's see. How do we go about understanding our customers, understanding the people who are using our products? That's a big question and a big problem for a lot of people, and I imagine it's a problem for that's a good question actually. How many people in the room categorize themselves as UX people? Who categorizes themselves as like a developer or something like that? You know, you're allowed to, hands up, you're allowed to be. This is kind of a tester or something else who rejects role definitions as tools of the oppressors. Yes. Okay, imagine you're building a startup. We're building Twitter for cats, okay? Which is awesome, and that's the customer in the founder's head. Unfortunately, that's the customer in the developer's head. That's the customer in the designer's head. And why is it not moving? It's a bit of a delay. That's going to be interesting. and that's the customer in the I don't know, sales and marketing's head. Being mean to sales and marketing for no obvious reason, because they're lovely people. Which tends to result in unhappy customers at the end, because no one's aligned on the people who are actually using the product. So we end up building different features, we end up looking at different workflows, we end up imagining different scenarios for what will make our customers happy. And the UX world has a standard answer to that question. The standard answer is persona. We go away and we find lots of our target customers and we talk to them and we write down, I can't get freaked out when this changes. We write down, we interview them, we look at how they behave, and we get all that information and we go away and think very hard about it. I often find when that happens, it's usually kind of one or two UX people in a room, maybe a UX team on a generous day, but it's often kind of, one or two people who go away and do that. And then away, we wander off and summarize that into kind of persona documents, the standard sad stock photo of somebody in a corner, a little, some descriptive text to give people an idea of what it's about, a typical quote, maybe some pretty statistics and stuff. But this acts as our kind of archetype, our summary that we can use to communicate this thing to others. And this does lots of good things. It acts as a way to communicate all this tedious research work that we did in a really succinct and rapid way. We can talk, people are used to talking about people and interacting with people, so describing people and their stories makes it really easy for people to understand those things. It helps us empathize with our end customer. We can look at their behavior more, we can start talking in their terms. It's a great tool to generate new ideas by putting ourselves in the place of the people who are using our products, and understanding that, cats like warm places and cats like high places. This is actually a thing, but the fact that this is actually a thing deeply disturbs me. This is what you get when you randomly browse Amazon. And best of all, you get alignment. Rather than different people having different things in their heads when they think about our customer, everyone has the same thing in their head, which hopefully means we all end up going in the same direction and end up with a happier customer at the end. This is all Melissa Perry faults, the cats. I stop it up from her. So what's the problem? Persona are awesome. What's the problem? Well, these days, we're doing a lot more rapid development. We are delivering more often. We're exploring more options earlier. And all the Lean UX stuff adds the UX toolkit to that approach. So, and these are the kind of problems I see with traditional persona when you move them over to more agile and lean contexts. First of all, they're presented as truth. We've gone away, we've done all the research, we've summarized it for you poor little simple developers, and here is the customer that you're going to be building it for. And sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes things change. Sometimes research wasn't enough. Sometimes we discover new things as we throw things out. So presenting this thing as truth gets in the way of better understanding the customer and listening to the feedback we get when we start doing prototypes and stuff. It's a large upfront investment of time and money in people. We go away and we have to talk to, N100 or N dozen customers. We have to go away and spend that time writing up. We have to go away and, write our report and our presentation for the people who are to never read the report, and the show reel for the people who will never watch the presentation, and the persona documents that kind of summarize all this stuff. And that's a lot of work. And it also tends to result in set and forget persona. Because it's a lot of work, it doesn't get done very often. And my favorite example of this is a client who had this wonderful, superb, excellently, impeccably done research on how their customers use mobile phones. It was great, and they spent a lot of money on it, and it was a really good representation of how their customers used mobile phones. Unfortunately, now was 18 months after the iPhone had launched, and when the research was done was 18 months before the iPhone had launched. And curious enough, in that period of time, the world had changed, and people were expecting different things from their phones and interacting with their phones in different ways. And so they were driving in the wrong direction because they were still in the land of, at best, a BlackBerry and texting and WAP and things. Anyone old enough to remember WAP? Just me. Oh, yay! And introducing products changes the world. Once you start releasing things, people start interacting with different ways. People start using it. You discover new markets that you didn't know exist before. And again, having personas presented as truth gets in the way of finding those things. I love this quote from Jared Spall, where he talks about persona being like the picture album, the photos you get after your vacation. The interesting stuff you get from persona is the going on vacation bit. It is where you go talk to your customers and understand them and synthesize and analyze that into tools and an understanding of how your customer works so you can move forward. Though, you can have a really good vacation photo and it'd be a really bad vacation sort of thing. But seeing that good vacation photo will remind you of the bad vacation, and vice versa. It's a summarizing tool, but you have to have experienced the vacation to get the value out of it. A story. We did, some time ago, a project it was an internal tool for a company, and it was aimed at the kind of VP of sales level in this organization, of which there were like half a dozen. Because it was I don't know why there were half a dozen people called VP of sales, but that's how they were doing things. And these people spent a lot of time and money, about once a quarter, shouting at people on the phone to get information from their various minions and sub-departments, that they could get this information so they can make strategic decisions based on how well things are going. And we could see by our on-site observations and our normal, traditional user research things that this was a major pain point for them. They were wasting a lot of time. You could literally see them banging their desks. They were all very alpha male, so monkey hand type people. It was very sad. But they were wasting a lot of time. They were wasting a lot of mental energy and emotion on these things, and this was a potentially automatable thing. So we had our little Sam Bossman persona, and we had our little experience map showing how there was this pain point that we could solve. And in a traditional user research product, that would have been the end of it. We'd have delivered our nice, here's the problem, go solve it. And people would have built that. Now, the interesting thing is in this particular case, we didn't. We built something that was more kind of concierge-y. Wizard of Ozzy. We built something that looked like a little web app that did this for them, but what it actually did was emailed us. We spent a day on the phone shouting at people to get this information, put it into spreadsheets, drew some pretty graphs and mailed it back. And they loved this. This was awesome. They played with it for some time, and then they never used it again because it was now automated, because they didn't have to use their magic VP powers to make this thing happen. So they gave it to Pat, their BA, to do for them. And when we saw this happen, suddenly Pat, the PA, kind of went to our primary persona. We shifted focus from an upper level in the organization to a slightly lower level in the organization. Pat loved it. Pat used it as a managing up tool, making his boss happy, you know. And Pat's friends saw this and went, could we do something like this for my bit of the company? So this went from a high level, narrow slice of the organization to a lower level, wider slice of the organization. Completely changing our primary persona. Now, you might say our user research sucked. Maybe it did. But I honestly can't think of a case without delivering that product, that initial prototype, where we would have been able to figure out that Sam would have kind of liked it and then never used it again. You know, and that would have still been a mildly successful product, but it was a much more successful product internally once it went to being Pat's product. Which lent us eventually to this other approach of doing things. First, we spent some time defining our customer and doing the thing that raises my hackles wearing my UX hat of just making stuff up. If we can get customers in, we get everyone in the room, everyone off the product team, get some customers in the room or whoever's going to be our target market, if we can. But if not, fine. And then we go away and do things like kind of ad hoc, made up, whatever you want to call them, persona, where we do, you know, what was the phrase? I think there's something called a zombie persona because they're kind of undead because they're not based on real people. This is from a slide from Janice Fraser was doing this back in kind of, you know, the 2012. Just little kind of made up summaries of what you think the customer is going to be like. A little sketch to get you some empathy and some idea. Other things you can do, empathy maps. Who's done empathy maps before? Yeah, about for, you know, for those who haven't, Google them. Dave Gray's, really nice idea. And you can think about, okay, if we imagine what our customers hear, what they think and feel, what they see, what they say and do, what are their pain points, what are their gain points for this problem space? And sometimes you can go away and get really good information from your actual customer to do that. Otherwise, you can just make some stuff up at the start. Another thing is to think about what kind of continuums your customer is interested in. This is stuff from Cindy Alvarez's book, Lean Customer Development. She has some kind of potential dimensions you can imagine. Where does my customer sit on this? And this can be a really nice and quick tool for kind of thinking about different groups of people. And again, the point of all this is to get... Why is there a growl alert on there? That's weird. Anyway, the point of this is to get alignment at the start, okay? To get everybody marching in the same direction, even if it's potentially the wrong direction, okay? And after we've done that, after we've got some agreement on what we think our customers are going to be like, we apply what I call the truthiness scale, which is we get all our little facts from our ad hoc persona or our empathy maps or our little kind of continuums, and we put one of them on a Post-it note, and we put them on a scale that goes from left to right, from stuff we made up to stuff we have some evidence for. You know, I think I might have seen, you know, probably this person sits over here. You know, I've met 3 people like this, sits over here. You know, I've looked at the kind of the customer analytics in our product, and 3,000 people have bought it with this demographic. It's right over here. And the thing that you get from this that you don't get just from doing the ad hoc persona and things like that is you get an idea of confidence, you get an idea of risk. How much effort can we invest in the things that we have discovered? And after you've got some, and you get some really interesting conversations with people at this point. You know, you get Bob from sales going, yes, this is definitely true. Everyone has a mobile phone or whatever. and Mary goes, no, none of our customers have smartphones. And then, your lone customer in the room goes, well, I haven't got one at the moment, but I'm going to be buying one next month, and it's like, that can surface a lot of assumptions that were there in your team about how your customers are behaving and acting, and you can get those out and have a conversation about them. The next step, which I do a lot, is then move true. Because if it's like almost every team, there'll be something that everyone thinks is right that actually isn't, because again, you've not gone out and done the research. This is especially useful for boss facts. When the founder or the CEO or the product manager says, all our customers do this, you can go, yes, yes, put it there. And then once you adjust the trail, you can go away and look for more evidence later. Again, the point of this is to get alignment early. And this gets us a kind of skeleton persona. This isn't, in all likelihood, it's not going to be true, because we've not actually gone out and talked to many of our customers, if any. But it does give us a shape that everyone can agree is where we are right now in our understanding. You've got alignment, you've got a sketch of your persona that you can then build on. The next step is refinement. How do you build that up? First step to that is adding structure. What people I've worked with using this have done is starting putting rather than having it on a continuum, put them into buckets, say. Stuff that's, made up, some evidence for, some weak evidence for, some strong evidence for. So you've got some ability to categorize your understanding of the customer and the level of risk in each of those things. This group color-coded them, sort of thing. Green for stuff we're really confident of, red for stuff we've made up, and yellow for kind of, some weak evidence for. You can see some of them rapidly adjusted there. This was a horrible person, by the way. It's weird. They were building a custom for so one of the interesting things that came out of this is that kind of, hey, we're building for people we don't like. Should we be doing this? Should we do something else instead? That was a really interesting thing that came out of that. Define some rules for how you manage those buckets. When we have seen this thing in 4 customer interviews, then we can move it from the made up to some evidence for. When we have used this fact to build a little bit of feature and that feature has been used, move it from the blah to the next column. Or even more useful, if we have this thing in our description of the person and we don't use that information to make any decisions at all, let's move it back a slot. There are these things that sometimes you get out of your user research, but you never actually apply to anything. And that can be a really useful tool to start looking at those things and think, oh, are we missing something? Should we be building something with that? Do we have a fact that's actually getting in the way of our kind of seeing a bigger market? And keep doing that again and again and again. Go out there, do some customer interviews, get some evidence, move it along. Build some prototypes, get some more evidence, move the little fact labs along. The thing I love most about this card is the fact that it was originally credited to Josh, and then Josh corrected him and said it was Jeff's, so it was then immediately corrected to include the reference to Jeff. So this is actually an instance of iteration and refinement at work. And by doing that again and again and again and again, we build a much more fleshed out version of our persona. We have some evidence for this. We can point to things on the board and go, we know this because, and the whole team can do that. This is the really fun thing about this, is that people see the tickets move on the board. The dev people can get involved in moving tickets around the prototypes in the product. The user research people can get involved with moving the tickets around, the customer interviews and stuff. It's a shared artifact. It's not owned by UX. It's showing confidence and risk rather than truth. You can do things like, you can use it to make product decisions and prioritization decisions. You know, hey, we're putting, we're going to start building the mobile app next week. Well, we can look at, that's a nice green ticket on our customers have mobile phones. We're really confident about that. Go ahead. Oh, it's a red ticket. Maybe we should just go talk to a couple of customers about it first before investing God knows how much into building a mobile app. It can be a really useful tool about kind of prioritizing your work. And the final step is a periodic realignment. When I originally started playing with these ideas with customers, I was thinking that would be that kind of refined thing would be enough. We would just continually go around making our understanding the customer better, and it'd all be great. But occasionally we missed stuff. We kind of missed the wood for the trees, as it were. So what we started doing was a kind of a periodic thing, more often early on in projects, less often later on in projects, where we kind of took a step back and looked at the larger picture, looked at the persona and the product and the business model and the vision, and saw how those things related, which led us to kind of a pattern of 4 things we did with the persona that we had. Sometimes we threw one away. We thought, this persona would be really important for our project. It turns out that they're actually not that important for our project. Early on, like in the Sam and Pat example, Sam was our primary persona at the start. Lots of focus on Sam. 3 months in, almost no focus on Sam, focusing all our efforts on Pat. Talking to Sam all the time was wasting our time. The reverse, you discover a new persona. At the start, Pat, the PA was almost ignored as part of the reasons for doing the product, and suddenly they were using it all the time, so we suddenly started talking to Pat a lot more. There's times where you are merging different persona together. At the start, you were thinking that the fact that, this person having children would be a major impact. They'd be much more time poor. They would have to focus more on kind of task-oriented stuff. And that turns out not to be true once you started throwing product at them. Okay, so then you can kind of merge your single and kids groups together. And the opposite, you can discover that there's this other facet to this person that we weren't aware of. I've got my examples somewhere. The real life, as it were, merge examples was we thought old people, that's not a very good term, seniors. Seniors who had their own transport, so like kind of buggies and scooters and stuff, would be behaving very differently from the ones who didn't. And it turned out not to be true in this particular instance, because both groups, the groups who didn't have their own transport, had support via other means for the things that was aimed at us. But the kids one was definitely kind of, oh God, these people had so much little time. So they were using the product in a completely different way. The ones without kids were using it very exploratory, sort of thing. They were searching and browsing, where the kids was, I need to get shit done now, and very task-oriented. So, the good and the bad and the ugly of these kinds of approaches to looking at persona. This, I think, is the biggest value to me, is we start talking about risk and confidence and value rather than truth. This is our current understanding of our customers rather than this is our customers. Because that means they're much more open to change. We can go look at them as an ongoing exploration, continual research rather than the research phase, which often means more research gets done. This is the kind of somewhat counterintuitive thing, I think, is people see those kind of the ad hoc persona, throwing empathy maps up as just making stuff up, and it's not as good. And that's absolutely 100% true if you stop. Not stopping means that you get to show more value, okay? And so as you carry on, people can see the ongoing value of the research work that you do, and so they're much more open to doing more research because they have seen that we have discovered these new facts, which means we've got a different market, which is bigger, so this is a good thing, so we should spend more money on talking to our customers. It lets you get started quickly and cheaply because you're focusing on alignment early. Which again, it makes it easier to get the research started because you don't have to sell them on kind of, a team of 4 people doing kind of user interviews for a month, and then another 2 weeks of them doing analysis and synthesis, and another week on top of that for writing up, which is a large swatch of cash. Whereas now you can make that early step with relatively little investment of time and money, see value early, and move on from there. Having a whole team approach to developing those persona means that it's a much easier sell. They have seen where these things have come from. They've been involved in where these things have come from. They've helped shape this. So they have much more faith that the thing that we're looking at on the wall bears some relation to their customer and is something they should pay attention to. And it embraces that change of kind of, when we start shipping prototypes, we see new things, and we can use those new things to affect our persona and our models of the customer very quickly and very relevantly, rather than this kind of, is it time to go away and build new personas now or not? I'm not quite sure. Is it now is the time to go invest another 3 months of money in researching all of our customers? That's a hard sell. Little bits of incremental research is an easy sell. It's not magic. The organization still has to buy into the idea. I just think it's, in my experience, it's an easier thing to sell in. There's a tendency for this to happen. There's a tendency for us to be comfortable that those things on the wall have been in the yellow column for a while, and let's go make some decisions on them despite them being a little bit risky. So you still have to be on top of those things, but at least you have something very direct to point to get those things activated. So, to summarize slowly on this clicker thing, come on, move. Get alignment early, through whatever method. Make stuff up, draw some continuums, do some empathy maps, just write a description of what you think your customer is on the wall, go to the existing marketing description of what customers are, get something out and public and understood by everybody, and then get a public, explicit model about how much confidence you have in those facts. Once you have that, you can go away and add structure and refine that model over time, get more and more confident, create new ones as you find new stuff, and periodically go back and throw away the stuff that's not relevant, make the new stuff that you've missed more explicit, merge things, and split them. And to summarize the summary, this is a common pattern I see with taking traditional user research and UX type methods into the Agile and Lean world. We move away from the research phase and we move to kind of a research cadence, a rhythm of regularly doing usability testing, regularly talking to customers, regularly tweaking our customers. We move away from a couple of UX researchers doing things to the whole team being involved, which makes alignment and adoption and acceptance much easier. And we move away from delivering truth to showing risk and process, which means we can adapt much more easily and we can make incremental feedback steering decisions much faster. Or to summarize the summary of the summary, if you do less together more often, you tend to do more. Thank you.
So I didn't quite understand the bit about the continuum.
Okay, you've got we've gone away, we've got everyone in the room, and Bob from sales has gone, I don't know, all our customers are middle-class women between 24 and 30. And you go, how do you know? And I just think so. That's made up. Whereas, Mary from analytics has gone, I have gone and looked at the sales history from our e-commerce site for the past 30 years, and I know that 75% of the people who have bought products over blah, blah, are in this age bracket and gender breakdown, and that you can be pretty darn confident of. And the stuff in the middle. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What's your best tips on helping founders who are quite egocentric about knowing who their persona is, who their customer is, and really they've done the zombie persona? So I was talking to someone recently and they were like, I know who my person is, I've got a picture of them in my mind. And I'm like, I'm like, what data is that based on? They're like, oh, no data.
I have a dream.
Yeah, so what's your best tips for negotiation in that scenario?
Find a way to finagle them as a tag along as an observer on a customer interview. And finagle that by lying if necessary. It's like kind of, I'm not sure about this particular fact about the customer, so we're going to talk to a few of them. Do you want to tag along? As long as you shut up and stand at that corner and take notes. And suddenly they will start hearing things that don't match that person. And that's a really powerful thing if it happens. Oh, and try and arrange 2 or 3 of those in a row rather than, because if they, like one person is like, you're a weirdo. Like 2 people, that's weird, 2 weirdos in a row. 3 people who contradict what they think, then people start going, oh, maybe I'm wrong. Make sense?
Yeah.
Any more?
Is there like a place within that wall chart to capture like questions or gaps? So like, we don't have any evidence or something, but we feel we might, or is that like?
Well, I think that's to some extent I've definitely seen people phrase things that they put question marks by the things that they're talking about, as it were. So that's one aspect of it. I think that. Yes, I mean I've seen people do that. It's like kind of what are their home computers like? Question mark, and that's in the kind of the made up thing, and we'll go away and find stuff out about that. There's one team who were very, and I'm not entirely sure it was entirely successful, but they tried to phrase everything as a hypothesis, as like a hypothesis statement about their customer. We think they spend bloody blah each week, and that was good in the sense that it made them question stuff very hard. It was bad, I think, in the sense that it was much harder to kind of look at the board and get a grasp of what that customer was like, sort of thing, because the language was quite complex. Does that help or make sense even?
So I think you just capture something with a question mark and it goes in the no evidence area, then you've got to get to look into it.
Yes.
The timeline, for lack of a better word, the kind of scale. Yeah. Is that just for one person, like one type?
Yes.
Okay.
So yes. Sorry, that's something I should make. Yeah. If you have 2 different groups, you have 2 different bits of wall, sort of thing. Yeah. And one of the things that you see in that kind of merge split stuff is that thing of kind of you look at the wall and going, these kind of things are sort of contradictory. This might be 2 people. As it were, or two groups. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any questions for anyone else as well?
Just really quick, any thoughts? I've heard actually Aaron Walter talks a little bit about this, about creating a persona for your product, for your brand. Have you ever done that? What are your thoughts about that?
I don't know. I don't do that. I've not found it particularly useful because how can I put this? I'm not going to put this delicately because I've had 2 beers. It's the purpose of building a new product is to meet business and customer needs. and pretending that your product is some kind of awesome person or awesome personality or whatever, can then get you focused on making that thing true, even if it disagrees with the where the money is and what your customers are doing. And I think people can get, it's the problem that lady there was talking about of the founder having a person in their head. You know, if the person has this kind of idea for a kind of happy, jokey product, and it turns out that everyone using that product isn't really very happy or jokey, it can take some time to back off from that. That lady behind you, sorry, was thinking.
Do you feel there needs to be a limit imposed on the number of personas that you can produce?
Yes.
It continue to
It depends, obviously.
So it's something like, for example, a government website where technically it's supposed to be available to all, but do you maybe categorize it in a specific way?
No. When it, in the cases where I'm building for everyone, there's kind of two flavors of that. One, the I'm building for everyone person is just plain wrong. Which does happen. And the other case is yes, but there's probably somewhere we're starting and trying to focus on that niche first as the primary, the people with the biggest pain point, the people who are going to be caring most, because they're the people who are going to be giving you the most feedback. They're the ones who are going to be most willing to deal with the pain when you mess up. So serving those people first is excellent grounding for when you start generalizing things to more people. Does that seem sane? Good. Any more for any more? Sorry.
Is it important to get together all the team? Because actually personally I do the same job, but just make personal interviews with support, selling, SEO.
I think it's important, I think it's useful to have people in the same room, because then you get the conversations happening in the room when people disagree.
Easy to get together because everybody has his own tasks and job to do. But
That's a valid point, and it is sometimes hard, and sometimes it's not possible to get everyone that you would like in the room, but especially hard when people are distributed in different continents. I've not really found a good way of doing this in a distributed way yet. I've tried doing this with Murally. I've only tried it the once with Murally, so I may have stuff to learn. It didn't work terribly well. So I'm, it's a work in progress. If anyone finds a good way of doing something like this in Murally, please tell me. Or any other tool. So yeah, yes, it's hard. Yes, sometimes it's hard to get people in the room. I do think there's a lot of value in the conversations when people are just talking about these things together, because you discover the misalignments between people's current view of what the customer is. When you're acting as kind of the central hub, you have to kind of, if you talk to Mary who says one thing and you talk to Robin who says something else, you have to go back to Mary and say, well, Robin says it's like this instead, and we agree, and just makes the whole process more complicated. Does that make sense?
So I'm trying to get onto the Habibi app, and the more I think about it, the more it feels a bit overwhelming, because you want to sympathise so much with the cause, but you can't. I'm not a pregnant refugee. But is there any traps that you find yourself when you're making the personas, or is that for the scale to decide on?
I think that the biggest trap is not going and checking, and the big, I guess it's a combination of two. One, not going to do the research, and overestimating your confidence in the true bits, which is why we added that extra kind of renegotiation of what true is in that early thing, because some people are really, really confident, and they're not. It's not a stupid confidence. They have some evidence, or there is strong agreement that this thing is true with the people in the room, but it's still not true. So having that early alignment of we're going to look at everything, we're just going to look at the riskier things first, as it were, means you end up revisiting all the decisions in some way and looking for some evidence for them. And you will also, while you're looking at the riskier decisions, you will probably be, it's not like you pick up one ticket and just go look at that one thing. You might be going, okay, we need to find out more about mobile phone usage for this group, but you'll be doing that in a series of customer interviews where, as in every interview you do with real users, they will feed you a metric shed load of information, and some of it will be affecting the other tickets on the board, as it were. Does that make sense?
What's what would a recommendation be for the number of people interviewed to validate a persona? For an app like Hobby.
That's a really hard question to answer and a common question. I think that the most useful advice I would have to do is you stop when you stop learning new things. That's the meta advice. If you are because if the first 4 people are giving you lots of information and like the 8th person is you're hearing the same story again, and the 10th person you're hearing the same story again, then that's the time to stop and start doing other stuff. The flip side of that is if you're on person 20 or 30 or whatever, and you're still hearing new stuff, then you're probably actually not identified a segment of people with a common problem to talk to. So that might be a sign that you need to stop and think about, who am I talking to? Am I talking to the right people? Does that make sense? Yeah, sorry.
It's not so much a question but a comment, because I've recently done something similar. I've just graduated from an immersive UX course at General Assembly, and we couldn't actually get access to our primary persona because our primary persona was an NGO project plan in Rwanda, and in 2 weeks we couldn't get sufficient access to her. So we did a sort of a proto-persona sort of workshop, like a zombie persona, with our client who did know who did know the persona.
Who acted as like a proxy for the actual.
So we did the empathy maps,
Yeah.
and then we did proto-personas, and meanwhile we also did research with as close to our target users we could get, which would be an NGO project planner like working in another country, and certainly those empathy maps and those proto-personas did give us a real insight with a sort of expert. Would you have approached it like that, or?
Well, I think that
Then where I'd niggle is on the gave us real insight bit of your comment, because it certainly gave you a common understanding, but without reality checking that in some way, by either talking to your customer or releasing prototypes that they used and getting feedback that way, or however you find out more information, you don't know how good that model is.
Yeah, so we then went on to validate it when we did actually get to speak to that target user. But it was a sort of, what can we do now within the time frame and resources we have. So yeah, it was then with a view to validating it once we had got hold.
Where the whole kind of sticky and truthiness scale stuff came from was the kind of problem. Sorry, I'm really rubbish with faces. So whoever was saying the founders having this idea of who their customer is, because that's the thing. It's like I've been the kind of there's this standard kind of spiel of like the Lean UX workshop sort of thing, and it starts off with people sketching the customer, and the customer is sketched and put on the wall and stays there, even when they're wrong. So it's like being able to understand that, yes, that's good for us to give us a direction, but we really need to reality check that with something. So having that extra layer of explicitly talking about our confidence and risk, I found really useful in not just putting it on the wall and forgetting about it.
You talked about doing this as an iterative process. What sort of cycles do you anticipate doing this? And I mean, in other words, how often do you revisit the personas?
Good question.
And what do you link that to? Are you linking it to an agile development cycle or something else?
standard "it depends" rubbish answer. The general things I see is a lot more often at the start, a lot less often later on. Like one particular startup group I worked with, we were tweaking that daily. You know, people were going out, doing some customer interviews, coming back, doing some analysis over lunch, tweaking stuff, going out and doing some more interviews. Later on, we got to doing the kind of the realigned stuff about monthly. So where we took a step back and, you know, there's the business model canvas, and that's the revenue model that we've got so far. That's our understanding of customers. You know, are there gaps here? That sort of stuff. I know other people have been doing it kind of along the kind of sprint boundaries and stuff. I'm not entirely sure if that worked well for them, to be honest. As for an explicit kind of agile model, I think one of the nice things about the people who did the coloured stickies thing is they kind of did it as almost a Kanban board-esque type thing. So that was something that, while it didn't like mesh exactly with the Kanban board that the product team was using, it was a metaphor that was in common, as it were. So we could talk about, you know, moving our confidence from unconfident to confident, and having, you know, defined rules for where we could pull stuff through, sort of thing. So that kind of we could use the same language.
So this is the update when you have more information, and in the beginning you're doing
Yeah.
your research, you're going to have more information, but as you get more,
Yeah.
It's basically, you do it more, you know, if there's more stuff at the made up stuff stage, that's when you're going to be updating things more often, you know, because that's the riskier stuff. And I think and this was actually one of the things that drove us to do the realign thing, was the fact that we had a team where there was lots of stuff in the red for quite a long time, and they weren't really moving it around much. And that was kind of, okay, do we need to take a step back and see why are we ignoring this? You know, and it's because that customer wasn't actually our customer.
Well, talking about the fidelity of the personas, do you actually use images and names?
Good question. Yes, sometimes. People have, I didn't have any photos of that. Some people put sketches and stuff up, and some people, and kind of later on, people have tidied them up for presentations, or kind of basically written down all the Postit notes as a story and presented that. Some people also had stuff that they considered, you know, I talked about earlier where people were discarding things that weren't used in the product. Okay, sometimes that was things that people on the team felt, despite the fact they weren't making a product decision with that, it was kind of letting them have a picture in their head of what this person was like more. It was helping with their empathy. So they, someone started keeping that as kind of around, so that there was like the product-related facts at the bottom. Then there was a pretty picture of the person, and around them other things that people thought were relevant, but we weren't making product decisions, and they sort of called that flair sort of thing for the actual person. So things like when we before we split scooter person and non-scooter person sort of thing, we weren't taking into account whether they before we merged, after we merged scooter person and non-scooter person, the scooter wasn't relevant anymore. But like the idea of like kind of Mavis on her scooter was just this thing that everyone had in their head, and so we kind of kept that up on the board. So there was other stuff around it. I should have photographs of that. Thank you. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just moving on from that, do you ever change the fidelity depending on who you're speaking to? So like cartoons, the lower fidelity, the more relatable it is. So like something like for developers, if they can see themselves, they can go empathy with them. But then if you take something like, I've heard that you can use a doll to represent a persona, you can't really go to your stakeholders and be like,
yeah, and I think that was the driver for that thing I just about the people who were kind of making the pretty one and writing it down as a story, was to present it to like the boss's boss, and we didn't want to just have that conversation about the Postit notes on the wall. So yeah, and that's something I've not explored much, with this thing of kind of upscaling the fidelity for other people, because that's not a space I spend a lot of time in. So that's, if people try this and do that, I'd be really interested in hearing how that goes. In fact, if anyone tries any of this, I would be really interested in hearing how it goes. Any more?
Any other questions?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.